Hey everyone, so I finally got a hold of the elusive X100V. I ended up finding this camera on Facebook Marketplace. It was used with around 700 shots, and I picked it up for about 2,000 Canadian the night before heading on a 3-week trip to Australia. And I really wanted something small and pocketable that I could take with me on my trip. All of my bigger Sony bodies are quite expensive and not very pocketable. The camera was very lightly used. It came with a Tiffin glimmer glass filter, which I used on almost all the photos that I'll be showing you. It came with a Peak Designs bag, a Peak Designs strap. Everything it came with new, an aftermarket thumb grip, lens hood, shutter release buttons, 3 batteries, and a bunch of other stuff. It was quite the kit. During my trip, I took around 1,500 photos with the camera and got a really good sense and feel for the camera. I'm going to talk about my overall experience with it, what I like and dislike about it, and why I'm going to be selling the camera. Overall, this camera is a blast to shoot with. The lens is sharp, the autofocus is fast, it has a great viewfinder and screen, and it just looks sick. During my trip, I found myself leaving this camera on auto, which is very much not my usual approach to photography. Being that I was traveling and moving around a ton, I wanted something that I could just kind of take out of my pocket and snap a photo really quick without worrying about settings and all of that. And this camera did a great job. So, film simulations. I feel like you can't make a video about the X100V with at least touching on film simulations because there's such a big drawing feature to the camera, or at least they were for me. I think for most people, they're going to be really happy with the straight out of camera look that these film simulations provide. I, for one, am not one of those people. I did like a lot of the film simulations. I used Fuji X Weekly and tried out a multitude of different ones. I really liked the Kodachrome 64 one that I had found and shot a lot of photos with that. However, I didn't find one that I was just 100% happy with every time. And the way that I was importing the images, because the Bluetooth functionality of the camera isn't amazing, I would be taking the SD card out, importing them into my iPad, into Lightroom. I found that I was always making tweaks and editing those images anyway. Another cool thing about this camera is the in-camera editing abilities. So when you take an image, you hit the Q button on the back of the camera and you're able to make some adjustments and tweaks very similar to Lightroom directly in the camera. I personally didn't use this feature because I knew I would be pulling the card out and putting them in Lightroom anyway, but if you do not use Lightroom, you don't like editing on your computer or anything like that, and you just want to make the tweaks right in your camera, you can do that, and it's awesome. When you make changes to an image in the camera, when you hit create, it actually makes a duplicate of your images with those changes. So you can see your original file as well as the newer one with all the tweaks that you did in camera. Battery life is also really great and something that is super important with a pocketable travel camera. You don't want to be carrying around a ton of different batteries. I had 3 of them, they're very small, and I think I only switched out the battery one time when I was shooting all day long. You can easily get away with using 1 battery for a full day as long as you're just being cognizant of the battery life and turning the camera off between shots. So why am I selling this camera? For me, it was really important that I had something quality to take with me on this trip. I had looked at a multitude of different cameras and I was really intrigued by the X100V, and I'm very happy that I did have it for my trip. But now that my trip is over, I'm back home, it's still off season for me, it's the winter here in Canada. I just don't need this camera in my life. I have a ton of other Sony bodies that I use for my commercial work, and I just don't think that the X100V will find its way into my workflow. For me, this camera is for fun, something I could throw in my pocket to take with me on a walk with my wife. What it is not is something that I would find myself using for my professional work. At the $2,000 price point that I paid for this camera, I feel as though it's simply too expensive to have around as a toy. Like, it's very novel. It takes really good images, it's a lovely camera, but it's also kind of pulled back the curtain to what the camera isn't. I thought that the film simulations would be something that would work well for me and save me a little bit of time, and that just isn't the case for me. I love everything about it, but it's just, I really don't need it. I think a direction that I like to take with this channel is just kind of messing around with cheaper, pocketable, more like point and shoot style cameras. and showing you guys that you don't need the latest and greatest hype camera to get really good images. Anyway, thank you for watching and listening to me ramble about this camera. If you have any questions at all, leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching. Peace.